There is a kind of person you have met before. Maybe it was a boss who spoke in a certain tone, and you felt your stomach drop before he even finished his sentence. Maybe it was a friend who knew exactly what to say to make you feel small and said it with a smile. Maybe it was a stranger on the internet who wrote 3 sentences about something you made, something you built, something you were proud of, and you spent the next 3 days thinking about those 3 sentences instead of creating anything new. You were controlled, not with chains, not with a weapon, not with any force you could point to and name, with words, with silence, with a look across the room, with the withholding of approval from someone whose approval you had learned, somewhere along the way, to need. And the worst part? You already knew it was happening. You felt the pull while it was happening. You watched yourself react from the outside, like a stranger watching a stranger. You said things you didn't mean to say. You stayed quiet when everything in you wanted to speak. You agreed with things you did not believe because disagreeing felt more costly than the truth. And afterwards, in the quiet when the moment had passed, you asked yourself, why do I keep doing this? Why can one person with one comment destroy an entire afternoon? Why does one piece of bad news collapse a morning that was going perfectly well? Why does the mood of someone who doesn't even know me determine whether I feel capable or worthless today? These are not small questions. These questions are the center of everything, because the answer to them, and there is an answer, does not come from therapy, though therapy has its place. It does not come from confidence tricks or social skills training. It comes from a direction most people have never looked. It comes from 2,000 years ago. From a small, cold room in Rome, where a man with a broken leg sat on a wooden bench and taught anyone who would listen the only thing he believed was worth teaching. His name was Epictetus. He was born a slave. He owned nothing. He controlled nothing about his external circumstances, not where he lived, not what work he did, not even the integrity of his own body. His master, a cruel man named Epaphroditus, once twisted Epictetus's leg to the point of breaking it, just to see if he would cry out. He did not cry out. According to the accounts that survived, Epictetus looked at his master calmly and said, "You are going to break it." And when the bone snapped, "Did I not tell you?" No screaming, no begging, no rage, not because he felt nothing, because he had found something inside himself that no master, no law, no army, no circumstance could reach. A place that remained entirely his own, no matter what happened to everything outside it. He called it the faculty of choice, the prohairesis, the thing in you that decides not what happens to you, but what you make of what happens to you. And he spent the rest of his life trying to show people where that place was. Because most people, he said, have never found it. They live their entire lives believing that their peace, their worth, their stability must come from outside. That they need the right circumstances, the right relationships, the right outcome, the right amount of money or recognition or love, and then they will finally feel settled. And the world keeps rearranging. The circumstances keep changing, the people keep disappointing or leaving or dying, and the feeling of settled never arrives. This is about finding that place inside yourself, not as a metaphor, not as an inspirational concept, as a practice, as a daily, deliberate, sometimes inconvenient set of commitments that over time build the one thing Epictetus believed was worth having: sovereignty, the absolute unshakable ownership of your own mind. Part 1. The invisible prison. Most people walk through their entire lives inside a prison they cannot see. The walls are not made of stone. They are made of other people's opinions, other people's moods, other people's approval or disapproval, the economy, the news, the argument at breakfast, the comment that got fewer responses than expected. Every day, 1,000 invisible hands reach into your mind and move things around. They shift your mood before you have had your coffee. They steal your focus in the middle of important work. They rob you of sleep at 2 in the morning. And you never gave anyone permission to do any of this. Epictetus knew this prison well. He lived inside a literal one. As a slave in Rome, he had no control over where he went, what he did, or what happened to his body. And yet, and this is the whole point, he was, in the deepest sense that matters, freer than almost anyone around him, freer than his master, freer than most of the Roman senators who attended his lectures after he was freed, freer than many emperors, because he had drawn a line inside himself, a line that said, this is mine and that is not. His body, not his reputation, not his comfort, his property, his plans, not his mind, entirely his, completely, irrevocably, permanently his. That line, that invisible boundary inside the self, is what the Stoics called the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, the command center of the soul. The place inside you that no external force can touch unless you open the door yourself. The question is, have you found yours? Most people haven't. Most people don't even know it exists. They have spent so long reacting to the world that they have forgotten they were ever anything other than a reaction. But you are not a reaction. You are the one who decides what the reaction will be. Part 2. The distinction that changes everything. Epictetus opens his handbook, the Enchiridion, with a single, devastating sentence. Some things are in our control and others not. 6 words. The entire architecture of a life well lived, things in our control, our judgments, our desires, our intentions, our responses, our values, our effort, our choices, things not in our control, our body, our reputation, our property, other people's words, other people's actions, other people's opinions of us, what happens in the world around us, whether our plans succeed, whether we are treated fairly, whether we are loved by those we love. This distinction sounds obvious when stated plainly. It is the most difficult thing a human being can actually internalize, because our entire nervous system, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, was built to care deeply about external things. Status, approval, safety, belonging, the opinion of the group. Your biology is working against the philosophy, and knowing the distinction intellectually is entirely different from living it. From feeling, in your body, in the moment of provocation, that what is happening outside you does not determine what happens inside you. Think about the last time you were genuinely, deeply upset. What was it about? Traffic, a person who didn't respond, a comment that felt unfair, a plan that collapsed, someone else's behavior, what other people thought of a decision you made. Every single one of those, not in your control. And yet, you gave them your morning. You gave them your sleep. You gave them your peace. The Stoics had a name for this. They called it pathos, being moved, being carried, being swept by the current of something external. And they considered it the primary source of human suffering, not the events themselves, the surrender to the events. The opposite of this surrender was not coldness, not indifference, not the pretense of not feeling anything. The opposite was apatheia, freedom from being ruled by what you feel, feeling everything fully and being owned by none of it. Marcus Aurelius was emperor of Rome. He commanded the largest army on earth. He governed more people than any living person at the time. And he woke up every morning and wrote private notes to himself, notes he never intended anyone to see, reminding himself of things Epictetus had taught a generation earlier. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wrote this not because he had mastered it. He wrote it because he kept forgetting it, because the pull of external things is constant, and the practice of returning to your sovereign center is never finished. Even an emperor needs reminding. Part 3. How control actually works. Here is how control works. Not the obvious kind, not coercion, not force, but the subtle kind that operates without you noticing. Someone says something critical about your work. Before you have a single conscious thought, your body has already responded. Your heart rate increases, your jaw tightens. There is a surge, shame, anger, a mix of both, in your chest. And then your mind races to catch up with your body. It starts building a story. What did they mean by that? Why would they say that here, in front of these people? Do they not understand how hard I worked? What do the others think? Do they think this too? The story grows. It pulls in memories. Other times you were criticized. Other times you felt not enough. Other times someone found you lacking. It builds a case. And by the time you open your mouth to respond, you are not responding to what was said. You are responding to the entire accumulated weight of everything that comment reminded you of. This is being swept away. The thing that triggered you was real. But the story you built around it, the meaning you assigned it, the reaction you performed because of it, all of that was yours. All of that was within your control. Epictetus said, "It is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things." Not the things, the judgments about the things. Your boss didn't ruin your morning. Your judgment of what his words meant that ruined your morning. The stranger's comment didn't wound you. Your interpretation of it as evidence of your inadequacy that wounded you. This is not a small distinction. This is not philosophy playing word games. This is the mechanism of everything. Because if it's the judgment, not the event, that causes the suffering, then the judgment is changeable. The judgment is yours, and yours to revise. Epictetus had a student who came to him enraged because someone had mocked him at the market. Epictetus said calmly, "Did he lay hands on you?" The student said no. "Did he take anything from you?" "No." "Then what was done to you?" The student paused. "His words," he finally said, "his words were done to me." And Epictetus said, "Then you have done it to yourself. You have taken his words and made them a wound. That was your choice, and it can be a different choice." This is the teaching. This has always been the teaching. The external world can produce sound waves. It cannot produce your meaning of those sound waves. That production happens inside you, and it is always, at every moment, yours to direct. Part 4. The mechanism of impressions. Let us go deeper into this, because the mechanism matters. Epictetus described 3 disciplines, 3 areas of training that together constitute the complete practice of the sovereign mind. The first is the discipline of desire and aversion. Learning to want only what is in your control and to be averse only to what is in your control. This sounds extreme. It is not asking you to stop caring about outcomes. It is asking you to care about them differently, with what the Stoics called a reserve clause. I want this if it is possible. I will pursue this, fate permitting. And if it does not come, I will find my footing in what does. The second is the discipline of action, acting always with the intention of service to your community, to your relationships, to the people around you, while holding the outcome loosely. You act because acting rightly is what you can control. Whether the action produces the result you intended is another matter entirely. The third, and the most fundamental, is the discipline of judgment. This is the practice of examining your impressions, the automatic interpretations your mind places on events, before accepting them as true. This is the discipline that, once trained, changes everything else. Here is a concrete example of how it works. You send a message to someone important to you. Hours pass, no response. Your mind immediately begins generating interpretations. They are ignoring you. They are angry with you. Something you said was wrong. They have decided something about you that you cannot reverse. These are not facts. These are impressions. Stories your mind is generating at remarkable speed to explain a silence that could have 100 explanations, most of which have nothing to do with you. The untrained mind accepts the impression as fact and proceeds to feel as if the worst interpretation is real. The anxiety, the rumination, the drafted and deleted messages, all of this is a response to a story that may be completely false. The trained mind pauses. It names the impression, I am generating an interpretation of this silence. The interpretation feels urgent. Let me examine it. What do I actually know? I know there has been no response. I do not know why. The why is not in my control to determine right now. What is in my control? I can send a clear follow-up if needed. I can return to my work. I can choose not to spend the next 3 hours inside a story. This is not suppression. The worry is acknowledged. The impression is seen. And then, because you are the one who decides what your impressions become, you choose not to make it the floor of your next hour. This is what training looks like in everyday life, not in dramatic philosophical confrontations. In the small moments that don't seem to matter, the unanswered message, the curt email from a colleague, the meeting that ended ambiguously, the plan that is taking longer than expected. Each of these is an opportunity, a small test of the discipline. And each time you pass it, each time you examine the impression before becoming it, you add another stone to the wall. Marcus Aurelius described this practice with a word that translates awkwardly into English, but means something like, see things stripped bare. See them without the interpretation. See what is actually here, not what your fear tells you is here. He wrote, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous and surly. They are this way because they cannot tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. This is extraordinary. He begins the day by accepting, not hoping, not pretending, but accepting that people will be difficult. He strips away the expectation that they will be otherwise, and then he grounds himself in something that cannot be disrupted by their behavior, his own understanding of what is good. He arrives ready. He's not surprised. He is not disappointed. He has already accounted for the human reality of the day and returned to his own sovereign ground before the first challenge has even arrived. This is available to you every morning before the day begins. Part 5. The 4 Pillars of an Uncontrollable Mind. The Stoics were not interested in abstract theory. They were soldiers and emperors and exiles, practical people who needed philosophy to work in the real world. They built their teachings the way a general builds a fortress, stone by stone, pillar by pillar. Here are the 4 pillars that, once built, make you nearly impossible to control. The first pillar, clarity of what actually matters. Marcus Aurelius was emperor of Rome. He commanded armies, he governed millions, and every morning he wrote in his private journal, not proclamations, not orders, notes to himself about what actually mattered. He wrote, confine yourself to the present. He wrote, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. He wrote these things not from a place of inspiration, but from a place of discipline. Because even with all the power of Rome at his command, he could feel the pull of things that didn't matter. The petty politics, the flattery, the desire for a legacy that history would remember, the vanity that surrounds power like a fog. And he had to keep reminding himself, none of that is the point. What actually matters for the Stoics was always the same: virtue. The quality of your character, the integrity of your choices. Whether you acted with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-mastery in the moment that was given to you. Not outcomes, not whether people liked your decision, not your reputation after you were gone. the person you were in the doing of it. When this is clear, when you have tested it, written it, lived with it, something extraordinary happens. The levers that other people use to move you stop working. Compliments lose their addictive pull. You do not need the approval, so approval cannot be used as a leash. Insults lose their sting. Your worth is not located in someone else's opinion, so that opinion cannot wound you. Threats lose their grip. What can be taken from you? Your reputation, that was never truly yours to begin with. Your comfort, temporary by nature. Your status, built on sand. The person who knows what matters cannot be flattered into betraying themselves, cannot be frightened into smallness, cannot be purchased. That kind of clarity is the first wall of the fortress. The second pillar, the observer, who does not flinch. Here is a pattern you know from your own experience. Someone says something. There is a surge, anger, shame, fear, hurt, and then you act from the surge. You say something you regret. You go silent when silence makes things worse. You spiral for hours into a story about what they meant and what it says about you and what might happen next. The Stoics called this being swept. The ancient word was phantasia, an impression, a first appearance of a thing before your reason has had a chance to examine it. The practice they prescribed sounds simple and is in fact one of the most difficult things a person can do. Learn to see the impression before you act on it. Not to deny it, not to push it down, to see it. When the surge comes, when the anger rises or the shame floods in, there is a practice. You name it, not I am angry, not this person made me angry. You say, this is anger, arising in me, in response to an impression I have not yet examined. The naming creates distance. The distance creates space. And in that space, your sovereign mind can step forward and ask, is this situation what it appears to be? Is it as serious as it feels? What would I actually lose if I did not react right now? Often the answer is, nothing. I would lose nothing. The impression passes, the surge subsides, and you remain unchanged, uncontrolled, entirely your own. This cannot be built in a day. But every time you pause, every time you name what you feel before you act on it, you add another stone to this pillar. And over months, over years, it becomes structural. It becomes who you are. The third pillar, the love of what is this one, sounds like defeat. It is the opposite of defeat. Amor fati, love of fate. The complete, genuine acceptance, not grudging tolerance, not patient endurance, but real willingness to be with what is actually happening, not what should be happening, not what you planned, not what you deserved, what is. Epictetus said, seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life. This is the hardest of the four pillars, because the human mind is a meaning-making machine, and the meanings it most loves to make are, this should not be happening. This is wrong. This is unfair. This is not what I planned. This is not what I deserve. And sometimes those meanings are accurate. Sometimes things are genuinely wrong and unfair and far from what you planned. The Stoics were not naive. They did not pretend the world was just. The Stoic question is not, was this fair? The Stoic question is, given that this is what is here, what are you going to do with it? Seneca was a writer, a philosopher, a statesman, and then he was exiled from Rome by Emperor Claudius, stripped of everything he had built, sent to a desolate island in the Atlantic. For 8 years, he did not stop writing, he did not stop thinking, he did not stop becoming more fully himself. He wrote letters from exile that are still read 2,000 years later. In one of them, he wrote, "It is not that I'm brave, it is that I know what can be taken from me and what cannot." What can be taken? Everything external. The job, the status, the comfort, the relationships, even the life. What cannot be taken? The quality of your soul in the face of all of it. When you truly understand this, not as a concept, but as a lived certainty, you become very close to uncontrollable. Because the primary lever of control is the threat of loss, and the person who has genuinely made peace with impermanence cannot be meaningfully threatened with losing what was always temporary. They have already accounted for it. They have already loved in full knowledge of ending. The fourth pillar, the long view. Marcus Aurelius had a practice he returned to throughout his private writings. When something troubled him deeply, a difficult senator, a military disaster, a personal failure, he would zoom out, first to the scope of Rome's history, then to the scope of human civilization, then to the scope of time itself. He wrote, "How many a Socrates, how many an Epictetus, how many a Marcus have time already swallowed up?" He included himself, the most powerful man in the world, reminding himself that time had already forgotten greater men than him, and would forget him too, eventually. This is not nihilism, this is precision. When you take the long view, when you genuinely feel, not just intellectually accept, the brevity of this particular moment, the things that seem to threaten you reveal their actual size. The insult that kept you awake, in 10 years, who will remember it? In 100, who will know it happened? The failure that defined you, in the scope of a full life, what percentage of the total story does it occupy? The opinion of someone who does not know you, about a choice they did not understand, in a life they are not living. The Stoics did not take the long view to feel small. They took it to feel free. Because when you truly see how brief and particular and unrepeatable this moment is, you stop spending it on things that do not deserve it. Part 6. On anger. Seneca wrote an entire book on anger. Not because the Stoics thought anger was the worst emotion. They didn't particularly, but because anger is the emotion most people believe they cannot control, and most frequently use to justify losing their sovereignty. He wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay, not suppression. Delay. When the surge of anger arrives, and it will arrive, it arrives for everyone. It arrived for Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius and Seneca himself. The practice is not to deny it or push it down. It is to insert time. In the time between the trigger and the response, your rational mind has a chance to arrive. Your judgment has a chance to examine the impression. You have a chance to ask, is this as it appears? Is my response proportionate? What would I regret if I acted now? Often in the delay, the anger does not disappear, but it changes shape. It becomes something you can work with, information rather than a force that is working you. Seneca described watching himself carefully in moments of provocation, noticing the early signs of anger before they became overwhelming, the slight tightening in the chest, the quickening of thought, the narrowing of attention to the source of irritation. These early signs are the moment. If you catch them there, before the surge becomes overwhelming, you still have a choice. You can pause, you can breathe, you can name what is happening. After the surge has fully taken hold, the choice is much harder, not impossible, but harder. The trained mind, even in the full force of anger, can still find the gap. But it requires more practice, more built-up discipline to find it there. This is why the Stoics trained in ordinary moments, not to become philosophical in the ordinary moments. Those moments don't need philosophy. To build the muscle so that when the extraordinary moments arrive, the moment of real provocation, real loss, real injustice, the muscle is already there. You have already practiced the pause 1,000 times in small situations. And so when the large situation arrives, the pause is available. The gap is there. Your sovereign mind can step into it. And what you do in that gap, the choice you make there, is your character. Part 7. The people who will try to move you. Not everyone who tries to control you is a villain. Some of them love you. Some of them are afraid. Some of them have never examined their own behavior closely enough to realize what they are doing. Some of them are simply in pain, and pain, when it has nowhere else to go, reaches for control. But the Stoic approach to all of them is the same. Their behavior is not in your control, your response is. There are broadly four kinds of people who pull at your sovereignty. The flatterer gives you what you want to hear. They praise you in ways that feel almost too perfectly calibrated. They mirror your opinions back to you. They make you feel understood and special. And then, at a crucial moment, they ask for something. Or they reveal a position that depends entirely on your continued approval of them. Or they withdraw the warmth suddenly. And you realize the warmth was a tool, not a gift. The Stoic defense against the flatterer is not cynicism. It is a sense of your own worth that does not need external confirmation. When you do not need the praise, when you have done the internal work of knowing your own value, flattery becomes visible. You can see it for what it is, and you can remain warm toward the person while being unmoved by their strategy. Seneca wrote, "Associate with those who are likely to make you better, not those who make you feel better about yourself, those who make you be better." The difference is everything. The critic tears things down, sometimes publicly with an audience, sometimes quietly with a precision that suggests they have been watching you carefully. The Stoic response to criticism is not automatic acceptance and not automatic rejection. It is examination. First, is there truth here? Not does it feel true? Not do I like the person saying it? Is there truth in it? If yes, take it. A builder who ignores accurate information about structural weaknesses will build something that falls. You want the information, even when it arrives uncomfortably. If no, release it, not with anger, not with a counterattack. Simply, this does not apply, and return to your work. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change." Happily, not grudgingly, not wounded, genuinely glad for the correction, because the Stoic goal is not to be right, it is to keep becoming better, and those are not always the same thing. The provocateur wants a reaction. They poke, escalate, say things designed to make you lose composure. In ancient Rome, this was a political enemy trying to goad a senator into public humiliation. In your life, it might be someone online, a colleague, a family member who knows exactly which buttons you have and presses them deliberately. Epictetus was direct. If you are insulted and you react, you have conspired with your insulter against yourself. The provocateur's power lives entirely in your reaction. Remove the reaction, and you remove the power, not by pretending not to feel anything, but by choosing not to perform your wound for an audience that is waiting to use it against you. Silence is often the most devastating response, or a calm, measured word, or simply continuing your work as if the provocation did not exist, because in a very real sense, it didn't. Nothing was done to your mind, only to the air between you. The dependent is the subtlest and often the most painful. This is someone you love, whose need for your constant presence, your approval, your reassurance, gradually becomes a form of control. Not through malice, through need. You begin adjusting yourself to manage their feelings. You say less, you edit your choices, you shrink yourself to fit their comfort. The Stoic here walks a narrow road. On one side, genuine love and care for others, which the Stoics valued deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote constantly about his duty to his family, his community, his empire. On the other side, the surrender of your sovereignty, which helps no one, not even the person you are surrendering it for. You cannot truly help someone from a place of self-erasure. The strength you give must come from somewhere, and that somewhere is you, intact. Part 8, on reputation. Let us talk about reputation, because this is for most people the most difficult thing to release. We understand intellectually that we cannot control what others think. We have heard it said many times. We may have even said it ourselves. And then someone misunderstands us publicly, or judges us unfairly, or spreads a version of us that we know is wrong. And the grip on our mind is immediate and total. Because reputation is not just vanity. It is, in the evolutionary sense, survival. The opinion of the group determined for our ancestors whether they ate, whether they were protected, whether their children lived. The urgency of reputation concern is not a character flaw. It is a deep biological inheritance. But it was calibrated for a world that no longer exists. A world where the group was 40 or 100 people, most of whom you knew personally. Not a world where the group is a comment section of thousands, many of whom have never met you and have formed their opinion based on a fragment of a moment. The Stoics could not have anticipated the internet, but their teaching on reputation is more relevant now than it has ever been. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others." Let that sit for a moment. You love yourself more than you love any other person. And yet you trust your own opinion of yourself less than the opinion of someone who barely knows you, evaluated you in a single interaction, and formed their judgment in a way that has nothing to do with your actual character. Why? Because we are socially wired to believe that the collective has access to truth about us that we ourselves cannot see. And sometimes that is true. Feedback from people who know us well, who have watched us over time, who care enough to be honest. This is valuable. Take it. But the opinion of a stranger, formed quickly, delivered harshly, about something they cannot fully understand, why does that carry more weight than your own knowledge of your motivations, your efforts, your history? The Stoic answer, it carries more weight because we have never been trained to locate our worth internally. We have been trained from the beginning to look outward for the verdict. The practice of sovereignty is, in large part, the practice of relocating that verdict, not to arrogance, not to the rejection of all feedback, to a grounded, honest self-assessment that takes useful information from the world, discards what is not useful, and does not collapse either under praise or criticism. Epictetus said, "If you are insulted and you react, you have conspired with your insulter against yourself." To conspire with your insulter against yourself. Think about what that means. The insulter offered something harmful, and you picked it up. You carried it inside. You made it your own. You turned their ammunition into a wound you inflicted on yourself. The alternative is not to become hard or indifferent. The alternative is to be so genuinely grounded in your own sense of who you are and what you are doing that the insult has nothing to stick to. This is not a performance of indifference. It is actual indifference, the kind that comes not from coldness, but from clarity. I know what I am. I know what I am trying to do. Your opinion of it from where you are standing, with what you can see, does not change what I know. That clarity is built slowly, through knowing what matters and why, through testing your values against real situations and seeing where they hold. When that clarity is built, when you have done the work of actually knowing yourself, reputation becomes something you observe rather than something that controls you. You can see what people think without needing to fix it. You can hear the verdict without needing to appeal it. You can be misunderstood without being undone by the misunderstanding. Part 9. On loss. Marcus Aurelius lost children. Several of them in a time when child mortality was common but no less devastating for that. He wrote about these losses in his private notes, not at length, not with elaborate grief, but with a directness that is, when you really read it, heartbreaking. He wrote, "The cucumber ripe, ask not for it longer. The autumn figs, let them be. My children, they were born and have gone. My children, they were born and have gone. This is not a man who felt nothing. This is a man who had trained himself to receive loss without being destroyed by it, who understood not as a consolation, but as a genuine orientation, that the things he loved were never permanently his to begin with. The Stoics practiced what they called negative visualization, the deliberate contemplation of losing what you love, not to be morbid, not to create anxiety, to love more fully in the present by remembering that the present is all you are guaranteed. When you hold someone you love and you allow yourself to feel, briefly, clearly, that this is temporary, that everything about this moment is temporary, something happens. The mundane becomes precious, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. The person across from you is not just a given, they are a gift. And gifts are fully appreciated only when you remember they are not owed. Epictetus said, "Never say about anything, 'I have lost it,' but 'I have returned it.'" Everything that enters your life was lent to you. The job, the relationship, the health, the friendship, the reputation, the good years. All of it was on loan. The loan has a term that you did not negotiate and will not control. When you receive this, when you really receive it not as a philosophy, but as a lived understanding, you become capable of a love that most people never experience. A love that is not clinging, a love that does not need its object to remain unchanged in order to continue loving. A love that says, "I have this now, and now is everything. And when it is gone, if it is taken, when it changes, when time does what time does, you do not collapse. Because you were never holding it in a way that required it to stay." This is what the Stoics meant when they spoke of non-attachment, not distance, not coldness, full, present, genuine love held with open hands. The person who has learned this cannot be controlled by the threat of loss, because they have already, in their practice, in their daily contemplation of impermanence, made peace with the possibility of losing everything. And so the world has no leverage over them, and they are free to love more fully than most people dare. Part 10. The Daily Practice. Stoicism was never meant to be a philosophy you read about. It was a practice. Daily, deliberate, sometimes inconvenient. In the morning, before the notifications and obligations, the Stoics prepared. The practice the Stoics prescribed was called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of difficulties. Before the day begins, you sit quietly and think through what might be hard today, not to dread it, to arrive ready. What conversations might be uncomfortable? What plans might not go as intended? What person might say something that tests your clarity? For each one, you ask, if this happens, what is in my control? What is not? Who do I want to be in that moment? The reason this works is simple. The primary reason people are controlled by events is that they are surprised by events. In the moment of surprise, the gap between stimulus and response collapses. You react before you can choose. The premeditation removes the surprise. Your body has already been through this territory. Your mind has already rehearsed its response. When the moment arrives, you are prepared. And a prepared mind is a sovereign mind. At midday, the Stoic practice is even simpler. Pause before responding. Not for an hour, not for a day, a breath. A moment of internal stillness in which you ask, what is actually happening here? Is this in my control? What would the person I'm trying to become do right now? This pause, practiced daily, becomes automatic. And when it is automatic, it is your character. In the evening, Seneca prescribed a review. He would sit before sleep and run through the day. Not to judge himself harshly, to see clearly. 3 questions every night. Where did I lose my sovereignty today? Where did I allow something outside my control to determine my state? What would I do differently, knowing what I know now? What am I grateful for that was within my control? The third question matters as much as the first 2. Because the Stoics understood that gratitude, real gratitude, not performed gratitude, is a recognition that despite everything, there were moments today in which you chose well. Those moments are the building blocks of the person you are becoming. Closing. There was a student who came to Epictetus and said, "I want to be free." Epictetus said, "Then be free." The student was confused. He had expected a sequence, a technique, a series of steps to complete. Epictetus explained, "Freedom for the Stoic is not something you earn after sufficient suffering or study. It is a decision you make in each moment. The decision to locate your identity, your real self, not in anything the world can give or take away, but in the quality of your own choices. You make that decision now, not tomorrow when things are easier, not after the next challenge resolves. Now, in whatever is present." The Stoics did not promise this would make life painless. They promised something far more valuable, that you would never again be someone else's to control, that your peace would be your own, that no matter what came, failure, loss, criticism, betrayal, time itself wearing away everything you built, you would remain in the only place that has ever truly mattered, yourself, fully, completely, uncontrollably yourself. That is the teaching of Epictetus, born in chains, free in his mind. That is the practice of Marcus Aurelius, enthroned in power, disciplined in his soul. That is the legacy of Seneca, who faced death calmly and called it just another thing outside his control. And now, if you choose it, it is yours.